I found my grandmother's ring on a resale platform on a Tuesday evening in November, listed at 40% of its value, photographed on someone else's hand. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, and I looked at the photograph for a long time. The setting was unmistakable. The specific curve of the band, the slight asymmetry in the gold mount that the jeweler had warned me about when he reset the stone 14 years ago. The small inclusion in the lower left facet that you could only see in direct light, but that I had looked at 1,000 times because it was my grandmother's, and before it was hers, it had been her mother's, and it was the only thing I owned that connected me to both of them. The ring that had been in my jewelry box in my bedroom in my apartment when I left for my work trip 17 days earlier. The listing was 11 days old. I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of my kitchen for approximately 4 minutes. Then I opened it again, and I screenshotted everything. The listing, the seller profile, the price, the photographs, the date. I sent them to myself. I sent them to the cloud folder I had maintained for 3 years for exactly this kind of contingency. I called my insurance broker. I called my lawyer. I made tea I didn't drink. Then I did the thing that took the longest. I sat with what I knew, because I already knew who had done it. I had known the moment my husband Andrew had said, 9 days ago, that his mother had mentioned finding the ring on the bathroom floor while she was checking on the apartment. I had known the moment he said she couldn't remember where she'd put it for safekeeping. I had known with the specific cold clarity of a woman who has been tracking a pattern for 3 years and has just seen the pattern produce its most explicit result. What I hadn't known until that Tuesday evening was where the ring had gone. Now I knew that too, and knowing it changed everything about what happened next. Let me tell you about the ring before I tell you about Valentina, because the ring is the reason everything else matters. My grandmother Helena came to this country in 1962 with a single suitcase and the ring on her finger. She had married in 1958 in a village in western Ukraine, and her husband had saved 2 years to buy the stone. A modest diamond, not impressive by current standards, but chosen and paid for and placed on her hand with the full weight of intention. She wore it for 61 years. When she died, she was 93 years old, sharp until the last 6 months, and she left me the ring because I was the granddaughter who had sat with her on Sunday afternoons since I was 4 years old, learning the names of the women in the photographs on her wall, learning the geography of a place I had never seen. She left me the ring because she said I was the one who understood that things carry their histories inside them. I had it reset when I was 26. The original setting had weakened. The jeweler said it needed to be done. And I wore it on my right hand for 4 years, and then, when Andrea and I decided to marry, I moved it to my left hand, and it became, technically, my wedding ring, though its history had nothing to do with the wedding, and everything to do with everything that came before it. It was appraised at its insurance value. Not astronomical, but significant, and entirely beside the point. The point was 61 years on my grandmother's finger, and 30 years of Sunday afternoons in her kitchen, and the specific feeling of wearing something that had been worn by 2 women I loved before the world I was born into existed. That was what was listed on a resale platform for 40% of its value, with a profile that, when I looked at it carefully, had been created 8 days prior, and which listed a city that was 40 minutes away, which was where Valentina's other son Pavlo lived with his wife Irina. Irina, who had been Valentina's favorite from the first year of her marriage to Pavlo. Irina, who Valentina compared me to in small, constant ways. Irina cooks. Irina always comes for the holidays. Irina never misses a Sunday call. Irina, whose hand was in the photograph on the listing, wearing my grandmother's ring. Valentina is 63 years old, the kind of woman who fills a room not with noise, but with the specific gravitational pressure of someone who has decided that their presence organizes the space rather than occupying it. She had raised 2 sons, Andrei and Pavlo, after her husband left for another city and another life when the boys were 9 and 11. And she had done this with the driven, total devotion of a woman for whom motherhood was not a role, but an identity. Not temporary, but permanent. Not a phase of life, but the entire architecture of it. She loved her sons in the way of a person who has no other significant claim on the world, which is to say, completely, unconditionally, and with the specific blindness that comes from loving someone so thoroughly that you cannot locate the boundary between their interests and your own. Andriy was the elder. He had always been the one she worried about more. Quieter, less socially fluent than Pavlo, more internal. When he married me, Valentina had been pleasant in the cautious way of a woman who was reserving judgment while she gathered information. By year 2, she had gathered enough to have formed views. By year 3, she was expressing them. Her views, condensed. I worked too much for a wife. I was too independent in ways that implied insufficient dependence on Andriy, which she read as insufficient love. I had money and property that predated the marriage, which she found structurally threatening in a way she expressed as concern. A family should be a unit, everything together. This idea of separate finances is so cold. I had not yet had children, which she attributed to my professional ambitions in a tone that made ambition sound like a character defect. And I had, on 3 specific occasions, declined to accept her domestic interventions without comment, which she experienced as rejection and which I experienced as basic property rights. Andriy loved his mother. He also loved me. He spent 3 years doing the specific, exhausting work of a man who loves 2 people with incompatible operating systems and has decided that the way to manage this is to stand in the middle and absorb the friction from both sides, rather than actually address the source of it. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had never found the motivation to take the harder path, and I had married him knowing this, and had spent 3 years recalibrating my estimate of how long it would take before that path became unavoidable. By November, I knew the answer. The path had always been right there. He just needed to see what was at the end of it. I left for the work trip on a Thursday morning. 2 weeks in Berlin, a contract negotiation that had been in progress for 7 months, and had reached the stage where my physical presence was non-negotiable. I had organized everything before I left. The plant watering schedule for Andriy, the dog walker confirmed, the neighbor's number in his phone. I had not organized Valentina, because Valentina had not been part of the plan. On Saturday, 2 days after I left, Andriy called me. His mother had offered to come and help while I was away. Cook some meals, keep the apartment tidy, keep him company. He had said yes. Without asking me, I said. "You're in Berlin," he said. I thought, "It's my apartment, Andriy. It's our home. My name is on the registration. You know this. We've discussed this." He was quiet. Then, "She'll just cook and clean. She won't touch anything." I had heard this construction before. The "it'll be fine" that was not based on any evidence and would not survive contact with Valentina's idea of help. I said, "Tell her not to touch my desk, my jewelry, or my documents. Those 3 things specifically." "Of course," he said. "Tell her directly, not implied, not be careful. Tell her specifically." "I will," he said. I don't know whether he told her. It does not matter, in the end, whether he told her, because the outcome was the same either way, and the outcome told me what I needed to know about whether Valentina would respond to instructions that came between her and something she had decided she wanted to do. I came home on a Wednesday afternoon. The apartment was clean. There was food in the refrigerator in the containers Valentina used, organized by category. The plants were alive. The dog was fine. Valentina had left the previous day, Andriy said, after 11 days. I went to my bedroom. I went to my jewelry box. I had kept my jewelry in the same box in the same position in my closet for 6 years, since before the marriage, and I knew its contents the way I knew my own kitchen. Not by consciously memorizing it, but by the accumulated familiarity of 1,000 small, daily interactions. I opened the box, and I looked at the tray where the ring lived, in the small velvet slot I had bought specifically for it, and the slot was empty. I stood there. I did not panic. I went through the box completely, every drawer, every compartment. I checked the bathroom, the nightstand, the surfaces where things might have been set and forgotten. I went through the apartment with the systematic attention of someone who is not yet admitting to themselves what they already know. Then I called Andrei. He was in the living room. He came to the bedroom doorway. "The ring is gone," I said. He looked at the jewelry box. He looked at the empty slot. Something moved in his expression. Not surprise exactly, which told me this was not entirely new information. "Mom mentioned," he said. "She said she found it on the bathroom floor. She put it somewhere safe." I looked at my husband. "On the bathroom floor. She said it looked like it had fallen." "Andrei, that ring has been in that slot every day for 4 years. It doesn't fall. It doesn't move. I take it out. I put it back." I looked at him steadily. "Where did she put it for safekeeping?" He picked up his phone. He called her. The conversation that followed was the kind I had witnessed before. Valentina explaining at length, Andrei processing at the speed of a man trying to hold two incompatible things, small concessions on both sides, nothing resolved. He hung up. "She says she can't remember exactly. She moves some things around and she'll look when she gets home. She can't remember where she put my grandmother's ring. She's going to look. She had it in her hands," I said. "She moved it from a specific place to an unknown location, and now she can't remember where. In my apartment, without asking." He said, "Sophia, she was trying to help." I did not say everything I was thinking. I said, "Tell her I need to know by tomorrow." And I went to my home office, and I opened my insurance file, and I pulled out the most recent inventory photographs. The ring, clear and specific, in its velvet slot, photographed 6 weeks earlier when I had updated the policy. Date stamped. Insured for its appraised value. Mine. I filed the memory of Andrei's expression. The one that arrived a half second before the explanation. The one that said he had already known about the ring when he picked me up from the airport and had not mentioned it. I filed it beside all the other expressions I had filed across 3 years. Then I opened my laptop and I started searching. I found the listing 9 days after I got home. 9 days of Valentina looking. 9 days of Andrei relaying messages between us like a diplomat between two countries who do not share a language. 9 days of the ring failing to appear in any location Valentina offered as a possibility. The resale platform search took 12 minutes. I searched by the ring's description. Vintage diamond solitaire, gold band, asymmetric mount, estate piece, and filtered by my region, and on the 3rd page of results there it was. Photographed in decent natural light against a white cloth, the stone catching the window, the small inclusion invisible at this angle but known to me, the specific irregularity of the mount that I had lived with for 14 years. I looked at the hand it was on. Irina's hand. I was certain. I had seen that hand at family dinners a dozen times, the particular narrow shape of the fingers, the short unpainted nails, the small scar on the thumb from the kitchen accident she had described at a holiday dinner 2 years ago. I was certain before I looked at the seller profile, and the seller profile, created 8 days after my work trip began, city 40 minutes away, joined the platform 11 days ago, confirmed it. Valentina had given my grandmother's ring to her favorite daughter-in-law. She had taken it from my jewelry box, carried it out of my apartment, and given it to Irina as a gift. And Irina, either not knowing its origin or not caring, had listed it for resale. I sat with this for 4 minutes. Then I acted. First, I purchased the ring. Through the platform, full asking price, express shipping to my work address. The transaction took 4 minutes. I have always found it clarifying to act before thinking too much about the cost. Second, I downloaded every photograph on the listing, the seller profile information, the date the account was created, the listing date, the asking price, the item description, which said diamond ring, family estate, selling due to downsizing. That phrase, family estate, the specific gall of it, the reframing of my grandmother's 61-year marriage as Valentina's family estate. Third, I called my insurance broker. I described the situation. She said, "You have photographs of the ring in your possession from 6 weeks ago?" I said yes. She said, "And it was removed from your property without your consent?" I said yes. She said, "That's theft for insurance purposes. I'll send you the form." Fourth, I called my lawyer. She listened to the full account with the focused attention I had come to rely on, and when I finished, she said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want documentation of everything. I want the value formally established, and I want a family meeting." She said, "When?" I said, "Saturday evening, all 4 of them, my apartment." "I'll prepare the documents," she said. I spent the next 3 days preparing for Saturday the way I prepared for difficult contract negotiations, methodically, without emotion, attending to every detail and anticipated response. I made a file. I printed the photographs. I printed the listing. I printed the platform transaction showing my purchase of my own ring. I printed the insurance inventory and the appraisal. I printed the timeline I had constructed, dated and specific. I put it in a folder, and I put the folder in my desk drawer, and I said nothing to Andrea about any of it, because I had learned, across 3 years of this marriage, that information given to Andrea had a way of becoming information available to Valentina, and I needed Saturday to be Saturday. The ring arrived on Friday. I held it in my hand for a long moment. The inclusion in the lower left facet caught the light exactly as it always had. The mount was unchanged. My grandmother had worn this on her finger for 61 years. It had been in someone else's listing for 11 days. I put it back in its slot in the velvet tray, and I closed the jewelry box, and I went to make dinner. Saturday. I set the table for 5, Andrei and myself, Valentina, Pavlo, Irina. I made food, simple, sufficient food, because I was not going to let this become a dinner party. I set the folder beside my plate. They arrived at 7. Pavlo and Irina together, Valentina with them. There was the usual movement of coats and greetings, and Valentina's production of a container of something from her kitchen, which she carried in and placed on my counter, with the ease of a woman who considered her contributions to my kitchen a standing arrangement. Irina was quiet in the specific way of someone who is not entirely comfortable with where they are. I noted this. I noted the absence of a ring on her right hand, where the listing photographs had shown it. We sat. I served. For approximately 12 minutes, we were simply 5 people at a table. Valentina talking about Pavlo's work, Andrei asking questions, the low, comfortable sound of a family dinner. I let it run. I wanted them settled before it changed. Then I opened the folder. "I want to talk about the ring," I said. The table changed. Not dramatically. The food was still there, the glasses were still full. But the quality of the air changed in the specific way it changes when something that has been unspoken becomes the subject. Valentina said, "Sophia, I told Andrei, I've been looking." I placed the first photograph on the table. The insurance inventory. My ring in its velvet slot, date stamped 6 weeks before my trip. "This is the ring in my jewelry box, 6 weeks before I left for Berlin," I said. I placed the second photograph. The resale listing. My ring on an unfamiliar hand, the listing details clearly visible, the date 11 days after my trip began. "This is the ring on a resale platform, 11 days into my trip." Silence. I placed the third photograph. A close-up from the listing, the specific irregular mount visible, the angle of the stone. "This is a detail from the listing photograph. You can see the asymmetry in the mount here. The jeweler who reset it in 2011 documented this. It's in the insurance file." Irina had gone completely still. I placed the fourth item, the platform transaction receipt. "I purchased my own ring back from the platform on Thursday. Express delivery, it arrived yesterday." I reached into my jacket pocket, and I placed the ring on the table between us. My grandmother's ring. In the center of the table, with the 5 of us around it, and nobody speaking. The seller profile was created 8 days after my trip began, I said. The listing city is 40 minutes from here. I looked at Irina directly. I recognized the hand in the photograph. Irina looked at the ring on the table. She looked at Valentina. Then she looked at the table. Valentina said, I didn't think. You took the ring from my jewelry box, I said. You were instructed not to touch my jewelry. Andrei specifically asked you not to touch my desk, my jewelry, or my documents. I looked at Andrei, who was looking at the folder with the expression of a man reading a document whose conclusions he had not anticipated and cannot argue with. You took it from its specific location in my jewelry box, you carried it out of my apartment, and you gave it to Irina. Valentina said, It was a family ring. It was my ring, I said. It was my grandmother's ring. Purchased by her husband in 1958, worn by her for 61 years, left to me in her will, reset in 2011, insured in my name, registered in my insurance inventory. It has never been a family ring in the sense you mean. It has never been available for distribution as a family asset. It was mine, and you removed it from my property without my consent. I thought, Elena? I said, using the formal version of her name, which I had never done before, and which landed with the weight of formality. I'm going to tell you what I've documented. The ring's removal from my property is recorded in the insurance inventory. The listing is documented. The platform transaction is documented. My purchase of my own ring is documented. I placed the last paper, my lawyer's summary letter, which stopped short of formal legal action, but outlined the legal framework precisely. This is a summary of the legal standing. The ring was a premarital personal asset. Its removal without consent constitutes theft under property law. The resale listing, even if the item was not ultimately sold, constitutes attempted sale of stolen property. Pavlo said quietly. Valentina, what did you do? Valentina looked at her younger son. The dynamic between them was different from Andrei. Pavlo had always been more direct with her, less willing to absorb, and his question now was not soft. She said, I wanted Irina to have something. She's part of the family too, and Sophia never... She stopped. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been certain of her position for so long that encountering its absence feels like a physical shock. I thought the ring should stay in the family. I thought since you have so many things, since you came to this marriage with so much already, it wasn't yours to give, I said. Simply, without anger, which took effort and which I considered a form of precision. It doesn't matter what I came to this marriage with. It doesn't matter what you think the distribution of family assets should look like. That ring was not yours, and you took it. The table was completely still. Andrei had not said anything. I looked at him now. You knew, I said. He looked at me. He did not say no. She told you about the ring before I got home. You picked me up at the airport knowing the ring was gone, and you didn't tell me. I thought she'd find it, he said. I thought it was just misplaced. You thought your mother had misplaced my grandmother's ring inside her idea of family redistribution, and you chose not to tell me until I noticed it was gone myself. He said, Sophia? Andrei. I looked at my husband clearly, without the filter I had been maintaining for 3 years, without the careful calibration that protected his comfort at the expense of my own clarity. I need to know, right now, which side of this table you're sitting on. Because I have been documenting things in this marriage for 3 years. I have been building a file the way I build every file, carefully, specifically, in advance of needing it. I have been patient because I believed the problem was manageable, and I was wrong about the word manageable. I looked at the ring on the table. Your mother took the thing in my home that mattered most, not the most valuable, the most irreplaceable. And you knew, and you didn't tell me. And I need to know why. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Pavlo shifted in his chair. Long enough that Irina put her hands in her lap. long enough that Valentina looked at her son with the specific expression of a woman who has organized her world around him and is beginning to understand that this may have been the wrong architecture. He said, "I didn't want a confrontation." "I know," I said. "You never do. That's the problem." What happened after that was not dramatic. Dramatic would have been easier in some ways. A shout, a door slammed, a clear break you can locate in time. What happened was slower and more specific, and in many ways more honest than anything that had happened in 3 years. Irina said she hadn't known the ring was taken. She said, quietly, to the table, that Valentina had given it to her as a gift 2 weeks ago, that she had said it was a family piece that wasn't being worn, that she had listed it because the style wasn't hers, and she'd wanted the money for something practical. She said this without looking at Valentina. I believed her. The way she said it had the quality of something true. Pavlo said, "You need to apologize." Valentina looked at her younger son. She looked at me. She looked at the ring on the table. And then she did something I had not anticipated and will carry with me for a long time. She folded. Not dramatically, not with the full collapse of the entitled, but with the specific, quiet deflation of a woman who has arrived at the end of something she built on the wrong materials. She looked at her hands. She said, "I didn't understand it was her grandmother's." "You knew it was mine?" I said. "Yes," she said. "I knew it was yours." A silence. "I wanted..." She stopped. She tried again. "I wanted Irina to feel as much a part of the family as..." She stopped again. She looked at me. "I didn't think you valued it the way you do." I thought about my grandmother on Sunday afternoons in her kitchen, naming the women in the photographs. I thought about 61 years and one suitcase and what you carry when you have very little and choose carefully. I thought about the inclusion in the lower left facet that you could only see in direct light, and about my grandmother telling me when she gave it to me, "It's not perfect. That's why I'm giving it to you, because you understand that imperfect things last." "It is the most valuable thing I own," I said. "Not in money." Valentina nodded. One small nod. The acknowledgement of someone who has finally understood a thing they had decided not to understand. I filed the insurance claim and withdrew it when the ring was back in my hand. I kept the documentation. I did not pursue the legal matter formally, because my lawyer said the civil case would cost more in time and energy than it would return, and I agreed with her assessment. What I pursued formally was different. Andrei and I spent 3 weeks in the hardest sustained conversation of our marriage. Not arguing, something more exhausting than arguing, the kind of conversation that requires both people to stay in the room and say things they have been managing around for years. He said, "I always thought I could make it work without forcing a choice." I said, "You can't. You've never been able to, and every time you've tried it's cost me something." He said, "I know." I said, "Knowing isn't the same as changing." He said, "I know that too." We went to a therapist. The therapist said, in the 3rd session, something I have thought about since. "You've been documenting evidence for a case you weren't sure you'd have to make. That's a particular kind of loneliness." She was right. It was. I had spent 3 years building files in a marriage, which is not what marriage is supposed to require, and the fact that the files had been necessary did not make their necessity less lonely. We are still married. I say this not as a triumphant conclusion, but as a fact with texture. A work in progress, a marriage under repair, a set of terms renegotiated with more honesty than they were originally written. The agreements are written now, literally written. My lawyer drafted a brief domestic agreement, nothing legally binding in the formal sense, but specific and documented. Access to the apartment by invitation only, for both families, no exceptions regardless of circumstances. Andrei's key to the apartment remains with Andrei and does not go to anyone else. If circumstances change, we discuss it first, both of us, and both of us agree before anything is arranged. Andrei signed it. He signed it with the expression of a man who had needed the frame to be built around him before he could stand inside it correctly. Which is not the same as being someone who doesn't want to stand correctly, and the distinction matters. Valentina came to the apartment once more, 3 months later, by invitation, for a specific dinner. She brought food in her containers, and she placed them on the counter, and she asked before opening anything else. She was careful in a way she had not been before. The careful of someone who knows the cost of carelessness. It was not warm, exactly. We are not warm, she and I no longer spend energy on the performance of warmth. But there was something between us that had not been there before. A boundary that we both understood and both respected, which is its own kind of relationship. Not loving, but honest. And honesty has always seemed to me more durable than warmth. She looked at the ring on my hand, toward the end of the evening. She looked for a moment, and then looked away, which I interpreted as acknowledgement. I did not say anything about it. Some things are recorded sufficiently in the record of what happened. My grandmother came to this country with one suitcase and a ring on her finger, and she built a life here for 61 years. She was not a woman who talked about what she had suffered. She was a woman who named things clearly, named the women in the photographs, named the villages they came from, named what had been lost and what had been carried forward. She left me the ring because she said I was the one who understood that things carry their histories inside them. She was right, and I understand now, more fully than I did when she gave it to me, that this is also true of other things. Marriages carry their histories. Families carry their histories. The small decisions you make in quiet years, what to document, what to secure, what to build before you need it, carry their histories forward into the moments that require them. Nothing important happens without preparation. Everything that holds has been built. The ring is back in its slot in its velvet tray. The inclusion in the lower left facet catches the light the same way it always did. My grandmother wore it on her finger for 61 years. It will be on mine for as long as I choose, and when I am done with it, I will give it to someone who understands that imperfect things last. The frame holds. It always held.